Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Katz, and welcome to Tuesday's first half kickoff edition of WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle, where we tell it like it is. Friends, Inside the Trojans Huddle is a game-like panel discussion that is posted on Tuesdays and Thursdays on WeAreSC.com and features WeAreSC columnists, staff writers, and historians. We first start off with the pregame show where we introduce our panel members for this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, and then give you the latest USC football news. Let's meet Tuesday's panelists, WeAreSC.com panelist and columnist who writes WeAreSC.com's Monday Morass, Yay or Nay, and Sunday Takeaways, in addition to regular season football and practice reports. He also hosts his own podcast show entitled Locked On USC. Marc Kulkin, a former William Jewell College DB and team captain, and WeAreSC columnist who writes the popular WeAreSC.com column Musings with Arledge, and now has his own weekly WeAreSC.com video show, Musings with Arledge, a graduate of the USC Law School, the pride of Lake Elsinore High School Tigers, Chris Arledge, a former USC first-team all-conference linebacker and team captain for the 1975 Trojans, team member of the 72 USC national champions, and starter on the 74 Trojans national champions, and a WeAreSC columnist who writes the Defensively Speaking after every USC game, the pride of the St. Francis High Golden Knights, Kevin Bruce, and a weekly WeAreSC columnist who writes Fridays, The Obvious and Not So Obvious, IMHO Sunday, and Mondays, WeAreSC Travel Guide, and an active member of the Football Writers Association of America, pride of the Alhambra High Moors, your producer and Inside the Trojans Huddle, and moderator Greg Katz. Folks, before we kick off this Tuesday first half edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, here is a brief bit of USC football news. The Trojans used last week's bye week to get refocused after the Trojans' difficult 43-42 loss at Utah on October 15th. Despite a bye week, the Trojans continued with physical practices, and during the weekend, the coaching staff used the additional time for recruiting both locally and nationally. Looking ahead this Saturday night, the now number 10 USC Trojans, 5-1 in the Pac-12, 6-1 overall, will be in Tucson, Arizona to take on the University of Arizona Wildcats, 1-3 in the Pac-12, 3-4 overall. The Trojans open as the 15.5-point favorites. And on a scheduling note, the Trojans homecoming game on November 5th against the Cal Bears in the Coliseum will kick off at 7:30 p.m. and will be televised nationally on ESPN. Friends, WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle greatly appreciate your viewer and listenership. And we encourage those of you watching on sites like YouTube to click on the red subscriber and like buttons. It's greatly valued and it's free. We also encourage you to check out WeAreSC.com, become a valued premium member of the best USC football and athletic news source around. And as a courtesy for those of you that are not currently a subscriber of WeAreSC.com, there is a limited time promotion going on right now that for $10, you can access all the WeAreSC premium stories, analysis, videos. It's a member deal costing you just $10, and the cycle runs through August 31st, 2023. So with that all done, oh, the poor Bell must be on bye week. A two-part question, panel. First, over the weekend, Oregon handed UCLA their first conference loss and first loss overall, 45-30 in Eugene, Oregon. Oregon is now the only undefeated team in the Pac-12. That being said, was the Bruins' loss to Oregon a good thing or a bad thing for the Trojans, or would it have been better if UCLA had beaten Oregon? We'll start off with that first question. Our leadoff hitter, good to have him back. Marc Kulkin, your thoughts on that particular question?
I don't think it makes one bit of difference that Oregon beat UCLA as far as USC is concerned. USC controls their own destiny. They win their remaining Pac-12 conference games, they are going to be one of the two teams in the Pac-12 Conference Championship Game. So whether, it's UCLA, Oregon, Utah, it doesn't matter. USC, as long as they win, they will be one of the two teams represented. So it doesn't, to me, it didn't make a difference. The only thing that I enjoyed out of it, I guess, is, UCLA loss brings a smile to my face. Travis Dye might have a choice. I mean, he can choose going up against UCLA, getting a feel for that rivalry as a Trojan. He can go up against his former team, which I'm sure he would love that opportunity. And he made it very clear after USC's 1-point loss at Utah, he's never beat Utah. he might want that opportunity in the conference championship game. So again, I don't care as long as USC's in there. I would love for them to play UCLA, just because I think the national attention would bring and would just cause George Kliavkoff heartburn like you'd never imagined. So that's my feelings on it.
Okay, Kevin, how do you feel about it? Good thing or bad thing?
Well, anytime someone beats UCLA, that's a good thing. This is as close to a tie as we can get it, I suppose. But I just find it impossible to root for UCLA. So yay for Oregon, and then let's go play them someday and beat them too.
Chris, your thoughts?
Yeah, in the big picture, I don't think it matters that much. Look, I hate both those teams so much that there was really no, I mean, I was actually hoping UCLA would win just because I thought it would make the USC-UCLA game a bigger deal. And it's been a long time since that game's been a big deal. But, you know, a 9-1 UCLA and a 9-1 USC team, both in the top 10, is still going to make for pretty good rivalry games. So, you know, whoever loses that game, it's good. I'm sorry they couldn't both lose. And it doesn't really matter. USC just has to take care of business and they'll be fine.
Well, I've seen so many different configurations of what happens if one wins or the other one wins. I think the simple way for me to understand it is if SC wins out, they'll be in the Pac-12 Championship Game. And there will be some intriguing games, matchups, Utah going to Oregon. So we don't know what's going to happen with Oregon, but all SC has to do is take care of business. And I think that will sort itself out easily. Now, secondly, panel, based on the remaining conference schedules of USC, Utah, Oregon, and UCLA, please for me rank the easiest to toughest in comparing schedules. A reminder that the two teams with the highest conference winning percentage at the end of the conference schedule will play in the Pac-12 Championship Game in Las Vegas on December 2nd. It should be noted that for the future, that on Saturday, November 19th, USC will be at UCLA while Utah will play at Oregon. And as a point of information, here are the remaining Pac-12 conference games for USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Utah. As follows: USC plays at Arizona, Cal, Colorado at UCLA. UCLA plays Stanford at ASU, Arizona, USC, and at Cal. Oregon at Cal, at Colorado, at Washington, Utah, at Oregon State. And Utah, their schedule reads at Washington State, Arizona, Stanford, at Oregon, at Colorado. Okay, panel, give me your overall schedule rankings of those four teams, easiest to hardest in that order, and any comment you wish to add. Mark, how do you see it?
Yeah, I'm looking at that, and I would say right off the bat, I think USC has the easiest schedule, and Utah has the hardest schedule. Between Oregon and UCLA, you can toss them in a hat, and whatever barfs out, you get. They can. I think they've got the number 2 and 3 hardest schedules, but in my opinion, USC has the easiest. Utah has by far the hardest. USC, after the game in Tucson, they don't leave Southern California again. And Utah has to go to Pullman, to Eugene, and while Colorado isn't a difficult thing, it is 3 road games. So there's my easiest to hardest, and Oregon and UCLA can decide which one of them have the more difficult schedule between them.
All right. Kev, how do you see it?
Gosh, I'm almost ambivalent, guys, with respect to this. The only thing I really care about is who USC plays. The rest of it's sort of, you know, I guess noteworthy at some level. What I do like is I think Utah's got you know, the game at Oregon is really the one that kind of sticks out. The rest of them are so what's, frankly. So I just line them up and play. Honestly, at this point in the season, as mentioned earlier, it's about who we play and how we play, really. So, you know, and then last man standing, let's go play them.
All right, Christopher, what do you think? Easiest to hardest?
USC has the easiest schedule. I actually disagree with Mark a little bit. I don't think Utah has by far the hardest schedule at all. Oregon's schedule is tough. I mean, at Cal and at Colorado, they're not losing either one of those games. But a rivalry game at Washington, that's a tough place to play. A rivalry game at Oregon State, that's a tough place to play. And then and you have Utah sandwiched in between those. I think there's a good chance that Oregon loses at least one of those games. I mean, even if you gave Oregon an 80% chance to win all three, and I think that's way too high, that still means there's a 50% chance they're going to lose one. So a lot of the talk before the UCLA game was, well, we need, you know, we can't have Oregon and Utah both go with only one loss because there's a chance UCLA or that USC would lose a tiebreaker to those two teams. I'm not sure it's going to matter. I don't think Oregon's going to win at Washington, home against Utah, and at Oregon State in 3 consecutive weeks. I don't think they're that great. They looked pretty good against UCLA, but Autzen is a really tough place to play, and UCLA is UCLA. And they're going to do what they did, especially with their quarterback, who's a talented kid, but is also a head case. You know, it wasn't a huge surprise that Oregon won at Autzen. I'm not convinced they're better than UCLA on a neutral field. Maybe they are, but Oregon has a tough schedule. Utah has 2 games they could lose. Obviously, they could lose at Oregon. They'll be an underdog, and at Washington State. That's a legitimate football game. I mean, Washington State has lost 4 games, but you look at they lost that, or maybe 3 games, but they lost that game at Oregon that they had in, or against Oregon that they had in the bag. And now they've lost 2 straight playing at the Coliseum and at Oregon State. And they didn't really get blown out in either game. So, you know, that's a legitimate football game, and Utah needs to be wary of that one. But, USC and UCLA only have 1 game on the schedule. I think either team really could lose unless UCLA cougs it. I mean, Stanford's terrible at ASU. ASU's been playing a little bit better. Defensively, they're not terrible. UCLA could, if they're not careful, they could lose that one. They're not losing at home to Arizona. They're not losing at Cal. So really, USC and UCLA should both be home free other than that game against each other. That's the one that's going to decide, the seasons for those 2 teams. So, yeah, USC's the easiest, UCLA next, Utah next, and then Oregon, I think, has the most difficult road.
I can get on board with that.
I'm sorry, Mark.
I can get on board with that.
Okay. I see it this way. USC has the easiest schedule, UCLA the next easiest. And then I believe that Utah has really 2 tough games. We'll find out Thursday night at Washington State, and then they play at Oregon. And then I looked at, I think the hardest schedule by far is Oregon, because those last 3 games at Washington, Utah, and at Oregon State, I agree with Chris completely. That's 3 tough games compared to Utah's 2. So for me, it's USC, UCLA, Utah, and Oregon in that order. So with that, let's go to the second quarter. Panel, it appears that Trojans wide receiver Jordan Addison and inside linebacker Eric Gentry have survived what was once feared to be serious leg injuries. Last week, Lincoln Riley said both Addison and Gentry were day-to-day. If for some reason one or both don't play at Arizona or in the future, what effect would their losses mean to the Trojans offense and defense respectively? And who might step up for each position? Chris, your thoughts on that?
Well, obviously, these are 2 of USC's better players. You don't want to lose either one of them. But USC's offense is going to score plenty over the next 3 weeks because those are terrible football teams. I mean, Arizona can throw the ball. I guess we'll talk about them a little bit later on Thursday's show. But Arizona can throw the ball a little bit, but they can't stop anybody. They haven't stopped anybody all year. They're terrible. USC's going to score as much as they want against Arizona unless they just don't show up. And the same is true against Colorado, who's horrific, and Cal, frankly, who's okay at best defensively and is horrible offensively. So what am I saying? I'm saying that if you lose Addison in some or, 1 or more of those next 3 games, it really shouldn't matter that much. The loss of Gentry probably hurts you worse. USC has a lot of weapons on offense. But Gentry is arguably the second best player on that defense, and losing him is not going to cost USC any of those games. But you better get him back for UCLA, that's for sure, because that's going to be a game where the defense is going to be challenged. And I don't like the thought of playing a good offensive team without that guy. So hopefully he'll be back. Who's going to step up? For Addison's replacement, USC has all kinds of offensive weapons. They'll find somebody to score, especially against the bad teams. Not worried about that, although I'd love to have it. Who steps up for Gentry? I don't know that anybody steps up for Gentry. I mean, somebody else will play, but nobody's going to play like him because they don't have anybody else on the roster that can play linebacker like him. That's just the reality. So hopefully he'll come back soon and be effective.
Mark, how do you see it?
Yeah, look, everybody wants Jordan Addison to play. He's definitely, somebody you want on the field, but I agree with Chris. Let's just be honest. You're not going to really truly miss him over these next few games. And when Riley says that it's day to day, he says that about every injury. So I wouldn't be shocked if we've seen the last of Jordan Addison this year, to be honest with you. I'm not saying I've heard anything. I'm just kind of throwing it out there. The way he got tackled and went down on the sideline.
Whoa. What do you mean by that? I mean,
exactly what I just said.
We'll say it again so I can understand it. You're saying
there's a very good chance, Kevin, that we have probably seen Jordan Addison play his last game this year.
And
that tackle along the sideline was awkward. He went down very badly. And the way he left the field on crutches, he didn't look good. So Lincoln,
is it a high ankle sprain, Mark? Do you know? Is it a high ankle sprain?
It looked closer to the knee than the ankle. Let's just put it that way.
Okay, so you apparently have some knowledge.
No, I just said I don't. I'm throwing it out there.
Then why you say stuff like that? That's what I don't
because
understand.
Lincoln Riley says that every injury is day to day. He holds his cards close to the vest.
Then maybe we should too.
Why?
I mean,
so we're not
like
allowed to have opinions anymore, Kevin?
No, you can have an opinion. Just
that's my opinion, Kevin.
Okay, fine. Based on
I've made it very clear from the very beginning that I don't have any inside information. I'm opinion. I'm allowed to do that. Okay.
Okay, so you have a medical opinion. That's great.
That's right. I have a medical opinion. Are we done now?
Is this going to be pay-per-view? I was going to subscribe.
I don't know. I'm getting interrupted again for no apparent reason. I'm trying to figure it out.
I'm trying to figure out what your point is and what you're basing it on. That's all.
So what I saw on the field, standing by the locker room as he left the field. That's what I'm basing it on. I'm basing it on the conversation I saw him have with another player. And I stipulated from the very beginning of this opinion, Kevin, I have no inside information. I'm basing this on what I saw.
Well, you just said you had inside information.
No, I said I have none.
Okay.
I made that very clear.
Well, apparently you need to make it clearer for me.
I'll do it. I'll say it 3 times next time.
We don't have that much time.
All right. Well, Mark, did you want to add anything on?
I lost my train of thought because Kevin interjected again.
Okay. Well, let's get back on track then. Can you tell us your thoughts on losing Gentry and who might step up?
Well, obviously, if Gentry can't play, Raylan Goforth is the next guy in the middle. So that's who you're going to see if Eric can't go these next few games.
There seemed to be some question about Shane Lee, I might add, that I heard that there is some question on him, although I have no authority of having seen it. It was just something that was passed on to me that he might be in question as well. But I'm sure that, Mark, you'll be at practice tomorrow. Is that correct?
I will not be at practice tomorrow, but I will have eyes at practice tomorrow, and I will have.
We can use all the eyes we can get. I assume that Eric will be at practice. We'll know who comes up that ramp and who doesn't show up. Sometimes who doesn't show up answers a lot of questions too.
Actually, you're not allowed. If you see somebody in a yellow jersey, you're not allowed to report on that either. Just FYI.
That's true. Lincoln Riley is very, as you said, close to the vest on information he wants.
He said Shane Lee was day-to-day and would play against Utah. We saw. He shouldn't have played against Utah. He missed 8 tackles.
Well, look, I mean, this is part of the problem that Shane Lee is a great leader and a good football player. Eric Gentry is a budding superstar. USC doesn't have a ton behind those guys at linebacker. Goforth has played better this year than he has in the past, but there's a significant drop-off from Gentry to go forth, and some of the younger guys like Rajon Davis doesn't see the field. So that tells you something. I mean, that's one spot where USC can't afford to have significant injuries, and it looks like they're starting to get nicked up where they can't afford to. May not hurt over the next few weeks, but eventually it's going to hurt.
All right. We had some good conversation. Is there anything that Chris, Mark, Kevin, that you didn't get to say that you'd like to say on this particular twin issue? All right. I think the loss of Addison, whether it's for one game or a series of games, you don't want to see that happen, of course, but the Trojans are so well stocked at wide receiver, they will still be productive, no question in my mind. In terms of losing Gentry, it's all about the UCLA game. I would hate to see either one of them, based on the schedule, rushed to play. Their heart may say, I want to get in there, but common sense and looking to the future. Although I will say that Goforth has played better. So if Shane Lee can't play, they probably would go with Goforth inside. And again, if Gentry can't play, I was impressed with Tavisi Nomura. I believe it was he was in there for a couple of big hits, and he seems to have made some progress. And thank goodness that they're playing the next three teams that they're playing. I don't think it's going to have a big impact, but certainly we want everyone there on deck, all hands on deck for the UCLA game. So it's something to watch. We'll pay attention against Arizona. We'll see who comes on the field, who doesn't. We'll probably know more based on practice. At least we will know off the record, perhaps. Unfortunately, as Mark pointed out, we're not supposed to on the record mention anything about it. So
real quick, the reason why I gave that medical opinion, Kevin, was because Jordan Addison anticipates to be drafted really high. We've seen players over these last few years who like to get ready for the draft. And if he's hurt to the point that he's not going to be able to come back 100%, it might be in his best interest, personally, to get ready for the draft.
Okay.
Okay.
Interesting speculation.
Well,
I'll tell you what, to Mark's point, I can't remember the specific player that I just read about, but one of the players on one of the recognized teams says he is not going to play the rest of the season. He is elected to get ready for the NFL draft.
It's that time of year.
Yeah, with about 5 games to go. And, we're going through down a whole different path now with the NFL draft. We saw that when it came to bowl games in the past, players bowing out of bowl games that they didn't think were significant for them to play in so they could be ready for the NFL draft. And we might be entering at some level a new perspective, especially for a player like Addison, who has already proven his worth. So it is something that could happen. It wouldn't shock me totally. Disappointing, but would it shock me? No, it could happen. I could see where you're coming from on that one, Mark, to be honest.
Well, I could also see a guy getting motivated to be the only 2-time Blitnikoff Award winner too.
We hope so.
Kevin, I think it comes down to, honestly speaking, we're from a different era. And
no, it's not about era, it's about money.
Well, I was just going to say, it is about money. And if somebody thinks they're going to lose their entire bank account for 5
turn your cleats in right now. If you're going into a ball game with that in your mind, just forget it. Just hang it up.
Oh, I agree with you totally, but it is the era in which we live in, unfortunately.
I don't think we've seen a ton of guys. I don't think we've seen a ton of guys sitting out who are going to be in the college football playoff. We've certainly seen it in major bowl games, and look, if a guy's beat up and he's going to be a first round draft choice, I get the business decision. But at this point, since we don't really know what's going on with Jordan Addison, I'm not sure. But if Jordan Addison thinks that he has a chance to play in the college football playoff, I'd be surprised if he didn't want to be a part of that. So I guess we'll just see what happens.
It's going to be interesting. I'll just say that. All right, panel, it's halftime. Time to answer some viewer questions and for panel answers. Kind of a free-for-all format, so feel free to chime in. There is no specific order. Folks, if you'd like to submit a question that we can answer or give our opinions, just go to either the Gary P. or We Are SC members message boards at wearesc.com. From there, you'll see the topic thread regarding questions for Inside the Trojans Huddle. Let's lead off with question one. And I do want to say that there were some questions from last week that we didn't get to, and I thought they were enough timely that we're going to carry it over to Tuesday's edition here. And with our new format of Tuesday and Thursday, Tuesday will be the day we answer viewer questions. So if you want to, those of you that are viewers that want to have a lot of questions, let's say on the previous game, such as Arizona coming up, or general football questions, Tuesday is when we're going to answer them. So let's start off with SC, the one in the OC. What will it take for SC to draw at least 70,000 fans to the Coliseum? Let's start off with that one. Comments?
Yeah, it'll take Notre Dame coming to town.
Notre Dame will get should be you would think it would be a sellout. I don't know how bad Notre Dame's going to come in, but I think with the streak that Notre Dame has right now on SC, USC fans will be looking for blue and gold blood. I would think it would be a sellout. How do the rest of you guys feel about it? Is that going to be a sellout?
10-1, they better be sold out.
I'm not sure we're gonna see a sellout for quite some time.
So
And it would be nice, it'd be nice if they get the parking fixed too, by the way. Make the experience maybe a little bit more upscale.
So let me ask you guys this question. SC is having a good season. It could morph into a great 10-11-1. Why? And we don't know this because there's still some home games to play. Why do you think that fans will not come for 70,000 or more? Is it that they are angry from what's happened in the past? Do they find out that COVID allowed them to watch a game and they didn't miss it as much as they did? Are they still unsure about where the team is? Are they not buying in totally? What do you guys think it is?
I don't think USC has filled in with new fans. They, in other words, the USC fan base has always been, we show up for a big game when USC is doing really well. Other than that, their crowds have always been in that 50 to 65,000 range, always, forever. So I don't know that USC sells their product very well. Are they filling in new fans to supplement season ticket holders that are moving on in whatever capacity? Other than that, it's, the University of Spoiled Children. Sometimes it's real. The fans don't show up. It's been like that forever.
Well,
Well, it actually hasn't been forever, and I'll tell you why, although I see where you're coming from. At the height of the Pete Carroll era, I think it was either 2005, 2006, or both of them.
But big games, the crowd would show up. Other than that, it wasn't a sold-out Coliseum.
no, actually,
I believe Cal was a sellout.
What was Cal ranked?
Well, you said your point was that you didn't think there
It was, unless it was a big game. USC never sells out the Coliseum. It's just a fact. Go back and look at their history. Look at the records.
No, I don't think you want to go and say they never sold out games. I was at sellout games back in the 60s.
Are we really going to stick to every
I'm
single
not sure
word?
I'd go quite that far,
Well,
Mark.
I
There's been
don't-
some
Again,
sellouts.
every big game, you'll get a big crowd. Unless it's Notre Dame, UCLA, a Cal who's ranked number 4, whatever they were ranked at the time. That's it.
I think the truth is somewhere in the middle, actually. If you go look at the attendance figures for 2004, 2005, you're going to see that USC was drawing in the high 80s every week. But that's extraordinarily unusual. It was not true during the John McKay era. It was not true when Larry Smith went to 3 straight Rose Bowls. It wasn't true in 2002 when Pete had that first good year. Part of that is because there's a lag. There's a lag between the program being back and the fans coming back. I think what you'll find is that if USC finishes this season the way I suspect they will, where they're going to be at worst 10-2, maybe 11-1, and they're going to have some big name guys coming back next year, so they're going to be a preseason top 5, top 6 team. I think what you'll see attendance tick up next year substantially. There's always a gap. It's also important to realize that the attendance figures are down nationwide in college football, and that's been an issue. That's been an issue now for a few years, where attendance is trickling down. There's still programs that sell out. but there aren't as many, and they don't do it as consistently, and there are more no-shows. So this is a problem actually nationwide. But it's always been an issue in LA because the reality is that LA fans don't show up to games unless there's a compelling reason why. And there are lots of other things that are going on. And while I would always, if I'm in town, go to a USC game, it's different being in LA than being in Lincoln, Nebraska. It just is. The entire culture of the place is built around going to a Nebraska football game. And it doesn't matter that they're terrible, people will still show up. In LA, people aren't going to show up unless you're really good. And you know what? For good reason. They charge a ton of money. It's a huge amount of time. It's a hassle to get in and out of the place. If you're putting a lousy product on the field like USC did for most of the last decade, I understand why people don't show up. So the attendance will start to trickle up over the coming years as USC becomes a bigger deal for non-USC fans, but people who like sports, because those are the people that make the difference between 61,000 and 75,000.
I mean, they downsized for a reason, and you've got homecoming in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever the date is, 7:30 p.m. kickoff. Typically, homecoming is going to draw a large crowd. 7:30 p.m. is not going to. I mean, USC kind of hurts themselves. They don't market their product very well. Now, they don't have a lot of say in that because of the TV, but it is what it is. And Chris hit it on the head. You know, when you're rolling, USC fans, the bandwagon will roll on in. But
And I'd like to also point out that I think there is, when you talk about an extra 5,000 or so, give or take, the NFL fans that grew up without an NFL team, that were young, and now the Rams are here, the Chargers to an extent, that does have some effect on your general football fan. It wouldn't have an effect on me personally, but I think on people that how they want to spend their money, it could have an impact. All right, let's go to question 2 from On a Jet Plane in Seattle. If you assume we have 30 roster openings, pick a number next year, what do you feel is the right balance between high school recruits and transfers? Will the new transfers have the same impact as this year's transfers? What do you think, guys?
I think you go with the best players you can get. This is the way of the sport now. So I don't know if there's a particular balance necessary. You can't count on, a freshman or call it a freshman, I guess. I don't know what else rookie. Let's use that term. Probably better. That is going to be around more than a year or two anyway. So go with the best people you can get, build around it, and play the game.
You don't turn down a difference maker. The reality is that at USC is going to have to find some transfers in the trenches next year on both sides of the ball, right? They're going to have to do that, particularly the defensive line. Thule's going to be gone. Figueroa is going to be gone. And USC needs some guys who can beat offensive linemen one-on-one. And they're only going to find them in the transfer portal because it's unusual to find a high school kid who can step in at 17 or 18, dominate from that position. So they're going to have to find some guys there. I think offensive line is less of an issue, but they're still going to need some experienced guys. I think other than that, you'll take a superstar, kind of like Alabama did, right? There was Alabama probably would have been fine at running back this year, but the Georgia Tech guy is a superstar and he was available, so they took him. I think USC will probably do the same everywhere else on the roster. They'll take a guy who's a superstar, but it's really defensive and offensive line where they're going to need guys who can play right now, and where you can't get a guy out of high school. Zach Branch will come in next year as a freshman, and he will make a difference at receiver because he's the closest thing we've had to Reggie Bush since Reggie. I mean, really, the kid is unbelievable. And so you can count on him to be in the rotation and make a difference immediately, but you can't count on any of these defensive line recruits. I don't care how highly touted they are. It's just harder at that spot.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think in a perfect world, you would want to have your base foundation high school recruits. But the transfer world is, I think, where they're going to go defensively next year because they'll need immediate help. And let's not forget that in 2024, they're going into the Big Ten with established programs. And we all know that in the old days, they might not have had the skill players they have today, but they have always had the beef on both sides of the line, and SC will have to be able to compete against the physical nature of the offense and defensive lines. But I tend to think they'll try to find the best players, and they'll figure, okay, if he's available, we're taking him, even if we're strong in a particular position, if they can do it. Comments? Any additional comments on that question? All right, let's go to question 3 from HUD. It says HUD SC. Which offensive player and which defensive player do you think has improved the most so far this season? Any nominations?
Yeah, our defense, probably Blackman has improved a lot. I like the way he's playing now versus where he played earlier in the season. Offensively, I'd give it to Caleb.
I will go along with Kevin on this with Blackman. I think he's playing smarter. I think he's playing with a lot more intelligence in a lot of ways on how he wants to go with it. Offensive players, that's kind of a tough one. They're all actually pretty good. So
I think I would. I'm going to throw out Kyron Hudson and Josh Fallow's name out there just because they're producing, especially Josh. And then on the defensive side, only because he wasn't starting at the beginning of the year, but he's kind of come on the second half of the season so far. Nick Figueroa, he's adding some balance to that line on the other side, helping out Tooley. So
since you brought that up, Mark, I'm going to throw another name out there. Will be Tellini. I think that Tyrone Tellini has really quietly contributing more and more and more on the defensive line. So he was somebody I would consider.
Well, I'd say
that's a guy.
Throw Bird in there and
Absolutely.
look at them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Tellini's a guy who I didn't expect anything from. I mean, I had sort of heard the whispers that Kansas State didn't think the kid could play. But you know what? He's coming around. He's not going to be an All-American this year, but the kid's making some plays. He's making a contribution. So I think that's a pretty good pick. I would even look. I would say I already brought him up, but I would say Raylan Goforth. I had been unkind to Goforth over the last couple of years because I didn't think the kid had any idea what he was doing. And this is a player who never came in with the size, speed numbers that you look for in major recruits. What you thought you were getting was a guy who was a heady, smart football player, right? A poor man's Matt Grudegood. He was not a poor man's Matt Grudegood. He isn't, to be honest. I mean, Grudegood was something special, but I think he's starting to make some plays. And so I think he's gone from being a major liability, which he was over the last 2 years, to a guy who's in the rotation and is sometimes making some plays out there and picking up the slack when Shane Lee was out and he came in and played the best he's ever played. So I think that's another guy who's been improving as the year has gone on.
Okay, question 4 from Trojans 2021 in West Palm Beach, Florida. It seems like the Big Ten has stopped expanding for the foreseeable future, which means by the time for a new round of conference expansion, USC, UCLA will have votes because they will be in the Big Ten. What do you think? Who do you think SC should want joining them in the Big Ten, Notre Dame aside? Who do you think? Do you think SC has a preference on who would join them and potentially, probably UCLA? Thoughts?
I think if they're going to, it's going to be the two Northern California schools. That brings you to 20, of course, with Notre Dame.
Okay, so let me be specific. You mentioned Northern California schools. I agree with you. Which ones?
Stanford,
San Jose State.
Yes, and Humboldt State, of course.
That's right.
So wait a minute. So you're saying
Cal and Stanford.
Cal and Stanford. So you're the Bay Area schools. Okay.
Yes.
I don't agree with that. I understand your thinking. It would be nice to have the rivalry, but look, if you can get, I think Stanford is a real possibility because they're a private school that would kind of match up with the Northwestern. I think that they would get the Bay Area audience. I don't know how much of a big audience Stanford has for the Bay Area as opposed to Cal, which has not been much. But I would think that they would take a look at Oregon as a potential draw, just from a a national standpoint, and I wouldn't rule out Washington either. But
I think they're more likely to go to the East Coast. I mean, I think North Carolina,
Right.
I think some of those ACC schools, the ACC is a train wreck right now. They have a terrible deal that goes on forever. Those schools want out. I could see North Carolina being a good pickup. It's a legitimate academic institution, despite the fact that they've had horrible scandals cheating with their athletes. Maybe they've cleaned that up, but it's a good school. And it is a major basketball power. I could see them trying to make a bid to get some of those ACC schools out of the Southeast and really intrude on SEC territory, which the SEC won't like it at all. But I think that's probably more likely. I think you're going to get a lot more from pulling in a Clemson than you are from pulling in an Oregon. So I think the Big Ten probably wants to go that direction. But Oregon, Stanford, Washington are all legitimate possibilities, I suspect.
I think it has a lot to do with television market. I think advertising rates, the whole thing. I don't know whether Clemson, South Carolina brings in a huge market compared to Washington and the Seattle area. I think
There are a whole lot more people watching Clemson football games than there are Washington Huskies football games these days.
Remember, it was the school presidents who turned their noses up to Oregon and I guess to a lesser extent Washington this first go around. Why would they change their opinion the next time around?
Money.
Money? Okay.
Money.
I think for scheduling purposes and everything that's going to be involved with this coast to coast super conference, you got to have Cal and Stanford in there. Again, they bring the academic prestige, they bring enough sports prestige that the Big Ten presidents will say,
If you're going to compete to pluck off some SEC schools, it's not about the academics, frankly.
to the presidents it is though, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Let me interject here because I think we have all kind of deviated with some quality answers. But again, who do you think SC should want joining them? Do they want to have Oregon in there, which means competing recruiting wise with Oregon? Is there a school or two that you think that SC doesn't want to join them in the big expansion programs?
I think that was exactly the question I was trying to answer. I mean, if you're USC, what do you want? You want somebody who makes the conference stronger and adds a lot to the bottom line, right? You don't want to bring somebody else in and give them a piece of the pie if they're not expanding the pie. I don't think Oregon, Washington expand the pie enough. I'm not convinced that Washington that Cal and Stanford expand the pie enough. But you may be able to expand the pie by pulling in a Clemson or a Miami. I don't know. I mean, it's theoretically possible. Those teams, and you also intrude on the SEC's territory in the South and take away a little bit of that monopoly. But there's no reason to bring anybody in unless they're going to bring in $100 million worth of revenue every year.
Yeah, I only see one player that can fit the bill, and that's Notre Dame. And I know that was excluded in the form of the question, but to me, that's your answer.
Good.
And if Notre Dame wants Stanford, the rumor is that Notre Dame would like Stanford. If Notre Dame said we want in, if you bring in Stanford, the Big Ten will bring in Stanford and Notre Dame because the combination of those two absolutely enlarges the pie.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's keep rolling here. We'll do a couple more. This question's from Barry G in Orange County. What do you think the fallout for USC recruiting will be from student body right, the NIL off-campus thing, shutting down any boulevard or stay doubted issues and the NCAA's revised NIL guidance if known at this time? So I will just chime in. I had direct contact with somebody that was directly involved with student body right, and they told me they were no longer going to be involved in it. The guy that actually, the brainchild of it, actually passed away not too long ago. So I think that's kind of a student body rights, kind of a dead issue. Anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, it's not going to have any
No, other than the fact that there's some tail to the various contractual obligations they may have entered into. So I'm curious about that. Players that haven't been paid or however that was set up. I don't know. I don't know the details to any of that.
I don't know if
Interesting,
they actually
though.
did anything. Look, here's the
Yeah.
thing. When we initially went to this NIL model where it was sort of the Wild West, then you had some examples of programs that probably shouldn't have been able to recruit elite guys who were recruiting elite guys. Texas A&M, a Miami program that's absolute dog meat, right? And so you've seen this. But the reality is, I think things are going to reassert themselves in a little bit more of a traditional setting. Alabama, once again, is cleaning up and recruiting. I doubt if it's because Alabama is paying more money than Texas A&M. It's just that most of the high school kids also, they want to be NFL players, right? They want to be All-Americans. They want to play in national title games. And you're not going to do that at Texas A&M. You're not. So I don't think you can just hand out bags of money and continue to land in the top 3 of recruiting classes in the country. I just don't think it's going to work. Jimbo pulled that off for one season, but now everybody sees what it's like to play at Texas A&M. And you know what? You need to get paid a lot of money because it's freaking embarrassing to play for that program. They're awful. They're awful, right? So nobody's going to. The elite players, they'll get a guy or two with their bags of money, but the elite players aren't going to want to go there. So USC is going to be just fine. Their NIL plan will be good enough, and especially for kids on the West Coast, and especially for offensive players on the West Coast, they're not going to go to A&M. They're not going to go to Miami. They're not going to go to those other programs over NIL. They're not. They're going to come play for Lincoln Riley, and they're going to score 45 points a game and win a lot of games. That's what's going to happen.
All right, let's go to question 6 from Trojans in the Valley. Any idea why the Coliseum offers truly dreadful food options at the concessions? Also, aren't they all embarrassed that LA has the best stadium hot dogs located down the street at Dodger Stadium, yet they offer one of the worst? I'm going to chime in quickly on this one. In my experience, having grown up going to the Coliseum since actually 1959 when the Dodgers were here, I think the Coliseum food is got way more options than it ever had. In terms of the hot dogs, as a person who is a Los Angeles Dodger full-time season ticket holder, they got rid of the original Farmer John hot dogs, and the replacement is certainly not a, as Vin Scully would say, Dodger dog from Farmer John. So I would dispute that the hot dogs now at Dodger Stadium, to be honest, are what they once were. But I'm in the press box, so I don't always go down, but I know that when there's bad food in the press box, which has happened on occasion, I have no problem looking at the different options they have down in the concession area. One of my favorite ones, they had a chicken bowl, which I liked, and teriyaki chicken, which I thought was pretty good. How about you guys? Do you have any comments on the concessions at the Coliseum in this day and age?
The best hot dogs at the Coliseum aren't inside; they're outside. They're the victory dogs. The people hot dog tray.
And
those need to be brought inside.
And the LAPD isn't chasing those guys away anymore.
That's right.
Which is nice. I never understood that. The LAPD was they're causing a near riot. They're chasing these guys down. They got their carts. They're running into people. It was a freaking disaster. Why? I asked one of the LAPD guys one time. He said, well, you do realize that, these guys, that there's no health inspector looking at these things. They're marinating these things in their bathtubs. I said, who's buying these hot dogs thinking that the health inspector looked at that shopping cart before they got there? What's wrong with you people? Can't we just have a free country where people can buy whatever ridiculous hot dog on the street they want without the LAPD causing injuries while they're tracking down these poor people? It's ridiculous. I'm glad the LAPD has changed its tune on that.
If they wheeled those things inside the gates during the games, they would have the longest lines of any concession.
Yeah, without a doubt.
All right, question 7 from Benji. I've kind of tabled this one for a couple of weeks. This is kind of generic. Benji asks, and we're going to confine this, I think, to college football, since this is a college football show. Who are your favorite sportscaster? Who is your least favorite sportscasters? I will start off. and saying my favorite college football sportscaster is not alive. That would be Keith Jackson. Who is my least favorite sportscaster? There's so many I wouldn't even begin to tell you, but they're certainly not at the level that they used to be in the old days. And I'm sorry, that's just how I look at it as an old person. How do you guys feel about it? Who's your favorite? Who's your least favorite college football announcer?
I'll weigh in on least favorite. The guys who do the SEC games on CBS, I think it's Nestler and Danielson, maybe.
Yeah.
Those guys are the worst. Listening to those guys do SEC, they're the biggest homers for SEC football. It reminds me of watching the Cubs games with Harry Carey, the way he's just outright promoting the Cubs and rooting for them, which you expect from the hometown announcers. But Nestler and Danielson, with their over-the-top worship of the SEC programs, is just disgusting. I hate listening to those guys. Absolutely hate it.
I'm going to go with Andre Ware, ESPN Friday night. For a guy who's won the Heisman, who knows the game as well as he does, I'm not sure he's watching the game he's calling, because he is bad. I mean, really, really bad. And Keith Jackson's always going to be my favorite. So that's
He's the best. He's the best.
I'll just tell a story versus get into this mind trap. But I got in an elevator. We were playing Washington, University of Washington. We're up in Seattle. Got in the elevator. Chris Schenkel, Keith Jackson, and Bud Wilkinson.
wow.
My jaw dropped, hit the ground, closed my mouth, and said, "Hi guys." And then Coach Wilkinson looks at me and says, "How's your ankle?"
That's kind of cool.
It was kind of cool.
Yeah.
You touched a spark in my head on least favorite sports guy. I think the one that I find comical, he's getting worse as he gets older, is Tim Brando. A big Southeast Conference honk. I mean, he can't even get the names right. It's to the point where I just laugh at his lack of preparation at this point, but they still put him on. So I guess if you're stuck in, I never could understand how Brad Nestler assumed right to the top. I don't get it. So any other comments on that one, or we're going to wrap it up here? Question 8 from Trojan Gift Horse in Santa Clarita, California. He has 4 questions, and I think we can touch on them quickly. His first question: can you lay out the rules for the conference championship selection as you understand them? I would say the rule that you need to know the most is that the 2 teams with the highest winning percentage will play in the Pac-12 championship game, and then they'll go to head-to-head confrontation. Anyone want to add to that answer?
No.
Okay. 2, how does this team need to continue to progress over the next several weeks in order to get the job done against UCLA? Comments?
Yeah, you need to win more one-on-one battles up front with your defensive front. You need to get in the backfield and disrupt the running game, and you need to get after DTR, because if you pressure him, he will do stupid things.
Yeah.
If you don't pressure him, he's going to kill you.
You take DTR out of the game. Yeah, that sounded bad. I didn't mean it that way, but if it happens, it happens. But if you get him mentally off his spot, off his game, don't make it easy, then it doesn't matter what the rest of the team does.
Okay. Quick question, answer 3. What did you see Oregon do against the Bruins that could or should be emulated? Comment?
Well, what I saw was a UCLA team that was fast on offense, slow on defense. Frankly, I was actually kind of surprised. A lot of big guys up front. They ran a variant of a 4-3, 4 down linemen, and big guys, which is fine, except they lack the lateral pursuit. So I looked at that. I go, oh, we can put some points on these bad boys, and get into DTR's head, and park a Farmer John hot dog truck right into his brain, and that'd be all right.
Yeah, I saw UCLA get beat deep. So if USC wants to start maybe running some play action and going over the top, that could be that could help.
I agree with you.
Here's the thing. USC's defense has had moments where they just don't do much, right? And we know that. But the other top 3 teams in the conference, Oregon, Utah, and UCLA, they all have defensive struggles that are at least as significant as USC's. None of those teams, they're all good offensive teams, and not a single one of them can count on their defense showing up.
Right.
And so far, what you've seen is that the two home teams won their games because it's hard to win on the road. And if you had reversed those and the LA schools were playing at home, you may have seen a different outcome in both games. So USC is going to be able to score points on UCLA. The question is whether they also give up 48. And I don't know the answer to that right now. I don't think anybody does.
Yeah, I don't know if I heard it or read it somewhere. It's not a crime to get blocked, but you got to come off your blocks. And that's one thing that the USC's defense doesn't do very well right now. They stay engaged too long. They don't shed their blocker. And UCLA's wide receivers and tight ends, they will block you.
All right, let's get to the final question here by Trojan Gift Horse, and then we'll wrap things up. Is this team under-relying upon its tight ends in the passing game? If we practice going to them more, would we be better able to defend them? Will the rest of our season look like a Thomas Kincaid art exhibit? Comment.
It's hard to comment on what we're practicing on because we don't get to watch them. So I don't know about that. But
Yeah.
look, USC did have some production from its tight ends against Utah for probably the first time all year. But the reality is that USC has a whole lot of good players in their backfield and at wide receiver. And those guys are better than what USC has at tight end. That's why those guys are getting the ball and the tight ends aren't. That doesn't mean that there aren't some tight ends that are decent football players. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying when you have the backs and receivers that USC has, it's not a huge surprise that those guys are getting more touches.
Yeah, we're getting a little bit exposed with respect to guys getting open at the in the back of the end zone. There's maybe 10 plays this season, maybe 15 that are going to show up like that, where guys are crossing, the back seam of the end zone. That's where the tight ends could really come in handy. We're not getting the production out of that we could. When Epps high points, it should be 6 points. It should be that simple. And earlier on, someone mentioned that Follows playing a much better brand of tight end football. He is, including blocking, by the way. So that's a good sign. That's part of that tight end package. This is not about receiving and production in terms of catching the ball, but it's about blocking and getting open and help others get open as well. We got work to do there, I think.
All right, guys, a reminder again, if our viewers, listeners, you have a question or comments for our panel, go to either of the We Are SC message boards and click on the thread that pertains to Inside the Trojans Huddle viewer or listener questions. All right, that'll do it for Tuesday's first half edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle. A reminder that on the Thursday edition of the Huddle, we'll kick off the second half with a preview of the Arizona game, speak to Lincoln Riley's public criticism of Pac-12 officials and its potential effects, and we'll give you our Pac-12 game predictions for this upcoming weekend. So until Thursday, a big thank you again to our panelists, Marc Kulkin, Chris Arledge, and Kevin Bruce, and a special thank you to all of you for watching to listening to Inside the Trojans Huddle. Hope you're having a great week wherever you may be. Go Trojans, and until this Thursday, this is your moderator, Greg Katz, saying, fight on, everybody.